following members are present. Councillors Alec Allison, John Anderson. My understanding that Councillor John Bradley is not attending. Can I just check, Councillor Maureen Chalmers, are you substituting for Councillor John Bradley? Hi, Councillor Chalmers.
Hi, yes, I'm substituting for Councillor Bradley.
Thank you. The following members are also present. Councillors Walter Brogan, Robert Brown, Arch Buchanan, Matthew Buchanan, Gillian Kalikis, Maureen Devlin, Mary Donnelly. Apologies from Councillor Joe Fagan. Following members are present. Councillors Alan Faulkner, Elise Frame, Shilleen Handybod, Graham Horn, Martin Hose, Eileen Logan, Hugh MacDonald, Catherine McClymont, Richard Nelson, Carol Nugent, John Ross, Graham Scott, Margaret B. Walker, David Watson and Kirsty Williams. Thank you, and I'll pass you back to the Chair for today's business.
Thank you, Stuart. Moving on to item 1, declaration of interests. Any? No. Thank you. Item 2 are the minutes of the previous meeting, and that's pages 5 to 12 in your pack. Could they be approved as a correct record? Approved. Agreed. Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 3, items for monitoring, social work resources revenue budget monitoring 2023 to 24, pages 13 to 20. And could I ask Graham Booth to speak to the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. This is the first of 4 reports that I'll take you through this morning. And the purpose of this report, which is on pages 13 to 20, is to provide information on the actual expenditure against the revenue budget for the period 1st of April 2023 to 31st of March 2024. Section 5.1 notes that the resource is reporting a break-even position, and as reported to previous committees, sections 5.2 and 5.3 note that within Children and Family Services there was one-off funding available to contribute towards the budget pressures in 23-24. And of the 9.2 million available, 6.9 million was utilised, with the balance available for use moving into 2024-25. Again, just a note that the resource is working and managing the overall budget pressures into 24-25, and that will be covered further again at agenda item 10 to this committee as part of the Budget Recovery Actions update paper. Sections 5.4 and 5.5 outline the position in relation to adults and older people services, and a break-even position reported and included within that position is a commitment in relation to the IJB of 1.446 million, and that was an increase of 174,000 on the 1.272 million anticipated at probable outturn. The Executive Committee in June approved that the IJB retain the non-recurring underspend within reserves earmarked for future care costs. Appendices A to E on pages 16 to 20 provide the details on the year-end position with the detailed variance explanations and proposed variants for each of the services shown in Appendices B to E. And I would refer members back to section 2 of the report. Committee is asked to note the final outturn position to the 31st of March 2024 of a break-even position after the proposed transfers to reserves, and also to approve the proposed budget variants. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. Any questions, comments? Don't see any. Do we agree to the recommendations in the report? Agreed. Thank you. Item 4, social work resources revenue budget monitoring 24 to 25, pages 21 to 30, and Graham again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Moving on then to the New Year report on pages 21 to 30, and this provides information on actual expenditure for the period up to the 14th of June 2024, and also to provide a forecast for the year up to the 31st of March 2025. Section 3 in the background notes change in reporting for 2024-25 as part of the new reporting regime within Fusion, and this reflects the expected outturn forecast on expenditure and income at this time. This is a new approach and will allow us to, for the early monitoring of outturn for both our employee and non-employee budgets, and to take corrective action as early as possible. Section 5.1 again notes that the 14th of June the resources projected outturn for the year is a break-even position, and this is outlined in our new service analysis statement at Appendix A, which details the key highlights by service for the resource. Section 5.2 notes within Children and Family Services there's been a temporary budget realignment of 7.7 million, and that was from adult and older people services arising from the reduction in pension contributions. This was approved by Council in February 2024 to contribute towards the children and family social care cost pressures, and this is obviously featured as part of one of our budget recovery actions in the previous reports to committee. Again, section 5.3, just noting that the resources working managing the overall budget pressures within 24-25, whilst that temporary solution is being utilised, and overall into 25-26. And again, that will be covered further in the paper later on. Appendices A to F on pages 24-29 provide details on the current projected position, and the proposed variants for each of the services are shown in appendices C to F. Again, would refer members back to section 2 of the report. Committee is asked to note the forecast to the 31st of March 2025 of a break-even position and to approve the proposed budget variants. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. Any questions, comments? Don't see any. Do we agree to the recommendations in the report? Oh, sorry, Robert.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just a quick question. We've got obviously the paper later on the budget recovery thing. I wondered if there was likely to be any kind of show-through from that in the monitoring figures for this year, so we can see, if you like, progress on that. One imagines towards the end of the year there will be figures there. How will that be monitored and shown?
Thank you, Councillor Brown. So just now, in terms of the children and families services, what we've done is put in the 7.7 million in terms of that and realigned that to the pressure areas. So you'll see at the moment in the appendix, as I say, at the moment, what we're projecting is outturn against that in terms of breaking at the start of the year. But as the year progresses, yes, there will be variances coming through in terms of obviously the 7.7 million and also the recovery update action. So what our intention is really within the body of the report really to make some kind of note just in terms of how much that 7.7 we're using, you know, in terms of these kind of permanent things that are coming through the budget, and then what we would hopefully be able to carry forward, as I say, to next year. But the starting point is to put in the 7.7 million against the pressure areas, and then as we go through the year, when the you know, recovery update actions are approved and then implemented, reduce the budget accordingly for those once approved, and tidy it up. And as I say, just make a note really throughout within the body report of how much that 7.7. So I suppose similar to where we were last year when we were saying we had the 9.2, and now we've noted how much of that we've used given what was implemented last year. Just kind of similar process again. But we will start to see variances coming through here. Now, it's just as I say at this point, given it was early in the year, we've put the £7.7 million in, and we're continuing to monitor it going forward.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any more comments. Do we agree to the recommendations in the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5, Social Work Resources Capital Budget Monitoring, 2023-24, pages 31 to 34, and it's Graham again.
Thank you, Chair. Item 5 is the Capital Budget Monitoring Report for financial year 2023-24, and the purpose of the report is to advise committee for the spend for the year to 31st of March 2024, and the resources spend was included in the overall position reported to the Executive Committee in June. Section 3 gives the background and explains the budget position for the year, which was a total budget of 2.030 million, and that budget was unchanged since we last reported to the Social Work Resources Committee back in May this year. Section 5 details the financial implications, and Section 5.1 notes the total programme for the year was 2.030 million, with a final spend position for the financial year of 2.348 million. And as noted in Section 5.2, this additional spend of 318,000 was mainly due to the timing of spend on the multi-year community alarms project, with funding for that spend already identified in 2024-25. Section 5.3 notes the update on the New Year programme is detailed in a separate report to the committee that I'll take you through shortly. I would refer committee back to the recommendations in Section 2 of the report and ask that the social work resources budget of 2.030 million and final spend for the year of 2.348 million be noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. I don't see any questions or comments. Do we agree to the recommendations in the report?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. Moving on to item 6, Social Work Resources Capital Budget Monitoring 2024 to 25, and this is pages 35 to 38, and it's Graham again, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Final report then, moving into the new year, and this is a standard capital budget report, the first for financial year 2024-25, and this reflects the budget and spend position to the 14th of June 2024, which is our accounting period 3. Section 3 gives the background to the report and explains the budget reflects the capital programme for the new year as reported to the Executive Committee at its meeting on the 7th of August. Section 5 again details the financial implications, and Section 5.1 notes that the resource total capital programme for the year is 1.027 million, and this budget is based on the original programme of projects approved back in February 2024 and is updated to include budget carried forward from 23-24 per the previous report. The budget also reflects the estimated level of spend achievable for this financial year based on current estimates. Again, just as Section 5.2, as I alluded to previously, we just noted the move to the Fusion IT system and the fact that we'll be focusing on our forecasting outturn throughout the year rather than on the in-period variances. And that will allow for early warning of any issues and give time to take corrective action throughout the year. As noted in Section 5.3, Appendix A notes the full forecast spend for the year, and for information also notes the actual spend incurred to 14th of June of 27,000. I would then refer committee back to recommendation in Section 2 of the report that the social work resources budget of 1.027 million and forecast spend of 1.027 million be noted. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. I don't see any questions, comments. Do we agree to the recommendations in the report?
Agreed.
Thank you, and thank you, Graham, for those reports. Moving on to item 7, Workforce Monitoring, April to June 2024, pages 39 to 46. And could I ask Eileen to speak to the report? Thank you.
Morning. So this report provides the standard employment information for the resource for the period April to June 2024. So section 4.1 outlines the attendance statistics for committee, and the details are in Appendix 1. The absence rate for the resource for June was 7.0% compared to a council-wide figure of 5.5%. This is the same compared to the previous month, and compared to the same period last year, the figure has increased by 0.5%. All of that translates to a projected annual average for the resource of 7.3% compared to a council-wide figure of 5.5%. Members will be aware that the resource managers continue to follow the maximising attendance procedures and work with personnel colleagues to ensure that all the supports are in place to enable employees to return to work and that appropriate actions are taken. In terms of section 4.2 to 4.5, the details are in Appendix 2. And the main points are that during the period there was 365 occupational health referrals, there was 4 disciplinary hearings, there was no grievances or dignity at work issues raised. During the period there was 40 accidents or incidents recorded, and there was 30 leavers during the period that were eligible for an exit interview, and of them 23% completed the exit interviews. In terms of posts that became vacant, the details are in Appendix 2A. And in terms of full-time equivalents, 40.79 posts became vacant. 34.98 of them will be filled. 1 will be filled on a fixed-term basis. 0.95 transferred to another budget. 1.41 has been held pending a review of service, and 2.45 were removed for savings. And I'm referring committee back to section 2.0 and asking that the workforce monitoring information for social work resources covering the period April to June 2024 be noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. I've got a question from Elise. Councillor Frame.
Thanks, Chair. I've just got a couple of questions on that item. The first one is obviously the resource absence figure for June is 7%, which is unchanged for last month. It's still very high. What adverse effect is that having on the resource? The next one, your occupational health referrals. Now, is that also having an effect on the absence figures? If people are waiting longer for the occupational health therapy, is it affecting the absence figures? And the worrying one is the accidents. So there's 40, that's an increase of 30. can we have a wee bit more information on that to see how is it split between, is it accidents in the workplace, or is it accidents and injuries caused by service users or different things? So it's just to have a breakdown of that, please. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. If you don't mind, I'll just take that backwards, if you like. In terms of accidents and incidents, there was a bit of narrative within the report that said there was an exercise in relation to us moving to a new Oracle Fusion system that required some accidents that had been reported, so maybe didn't take place during the period, and they were then closed off. So that accounts for the increase that you can see when you compare it to the same period last year. So what I do know is that actually during the period 21 accidents or incidents took place. So the figure isn't as stark as it looks. It's in line with its normal parameters. In terms of occupational health referrals, we're not experiencing a delay that would impact on absence. We've actually moved to a new occupational health provider. You might be aware that there was a report that went recently to the Executive Committee that outlined all the employee supports that we're putting in place for people that are off and gave details in terms of our occupational health provider. I think previously we had reported in terms of the transition to the new occupational health provider. We were experiencing some delays, but that has now dissipated and we're not experiencing delays in terms of the occupational health referrals that would impact on our absence rate. And then finally, your first point around the absence rate being 7% and the impact that has on the resource. You'll be aware, as has previously been commented at this committee, in terms of the absence rate for social work resource, they do experience a higher absence rate than other areas of the council, mainly due to the demographic of the workforce, and they will tend to experience more sort of longer term absence. The resource has got steps in place to mitigate that in terms of the absence rate, whether it be additional cover arrangements that are in place so that it doesn't impact on service delivery. Thank you.
Thanks, Eileen. You happy with that? I don't see any more questions. Do we agree to the recommendations in the report?
Agreed.
Thank you, and thanks for the report, Eileen. Moving on to item 8, Social Work Risk Register, pages 47 to 58, and could I ask Craig to speak to the report? Thank you.
Thank you. So you will see from item 4.2 that we haven't had any changes to the social work top risks detailed in the table. These are around funding, workforce, market capacity, the Strategic Commission Plan outcomes, and also the cost of living crisis. And again, we've provided further detail against each of those in Appendix 2. Moving on to 4.4, you'll note that there is a range of other risks that are managed through the resource, and indeed those linked to some of the risks across the wider council. And again, we've provided further detail of those in Appendix 3. You'll see at 4.5 that the change in winter demand pressures has come down as the service has responded to need, and we're obviously seeing some slightly less demand across the summer period. However, we are now starting planning for the winter planning process for this year, and again the actions that we take will help mitigate against those risks, and we will bring back a future report in terms of the winter plan in due course. And I would then take the committee back to the recommendations as outlined in section 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Councillor Frame.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a couple of questions, Craig, but on that. So the first one, recently the resource has changed its qualification for new employees from an SVQ 3 back to an SVQ 2. It's just if we can have some more information on that. And the second one, with the two local care homes that have been closed by South Lanarkshire, what number of staff have uptake for have they kept their roles in South Lanarkshire, and what's the percentage that have maybe left on that? Thank you.
I can pick those questions up, Councillor Frame. So in terms of the SVQ 2s and 3s, you'll be aware that the council recently completed a job evaluation evaluation exercise for our care home staff. So that kind of moved their kind of pay banding up a few increments. So when we're doing that exercise, we're looking at the kind of the tasks and skills being applied within the job evaluation scheme. They were kind of rated at around about SVQ level 3 in terms of the skill level that the grading kind of mapped against. So in recent recruitment campaigns, we've been looking to try and recruit people at SVQ level 3, but what we find is there's not really a kind of supply of that kind of workforce. For care home staff, the requirement for registration is an SVQ level 2, so the majority of the workforce supply, as it were, is qualified to that level. So we've had a look at our recruitment campaign. So we're really looking for staff who hold SVQ level 2 to be registered, who are demonstrating high levels of kind of competence, so they can work at the level we're looking for that. But we're trying to just make sure we're pitching our recruitment process at the right level, so we can recruit staff in and obviously scale them up and encourage people to take up opportunities within our SVQ3 programme. In terms of the 2 care homes, Jura House is now closed, and there's a lot of progress being made in terms of the closure around McClymonds. We've met with all the staff groups and individually. We've offered taster sessions around a range of services, and I'm pleased to say the majority of the workforce are staying with us in different roles. Some have been redeployed now on a permanent basis around care at home, other care homes, care and support, for example. There's a few others still in the process of working through exactly what they want to do, but we're confident they'll all find a slot within our existing care arrangements. One or two people have chosen to retire, but I say that the vast majority of folks are lined up for an ongoing job within our care services, which is a good news story. These are good staff, very able staff, so it's good to see them kind of continue their work within the council's resources.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. I don't see any more questions. Do we agree to the recommendations in the report? Agreed. Thank you, Craig. Moving on to item 9, Social Work Resource Plan, Quarter 4, Progress Report 2023-24, and that's pages 59 to 90. And could I ask Craig again to speak to the report? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, again, I would take the committee to 5.3, which notes the key achievements, and we have outlined those within 5.31 and 5.32. And again, there is more detail provided in Appendix 2. In relation to some areas for improvement, these are again provided more detail in Appendix 3. However, they specifically relate to the recycling of equipment, and you will note that due to changes in the eligibility criteria, we're not now seeing the same numbers of equipment being delivered or indeed recycled as a result of that. So that explains that particular issue. And thereafter, you'll also see updates in terms of the children subject to the new compulsory supervision order being seen within 15 days, and also the percentage of the reports submitted to the children's reporter. And again, these have been slightly below target, and work is ongoing to resolve the same. The other area I would want to highlight is Section 6, and we had committed to bringing back an update in relation to the emergency release of prisoners. And you'll see at 6.4 the local arrangements that were put in place to manage that. And you'll also note that there's actually a session today being held nationally to identify any lessons learned, and in turn then things that might be done differently at a national level in the event of further emergency release arrangements being required. Probably most importantly at 6.6, you'll also see the work that we are currently undertaking alongside the court around reducing the need to place people on remand and short-term sentences, and that work is ongoing. And beyond that then, I would take you back to the 4 recommendations set out in Section 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Councillor Brown.
Thanks very much, Chair. 2 questions, if I may. There's reference in the report to the single assessment framework that you're taking forward. Now, that's against the background, obviously, of some of the delays in submitting reports and all that kind of thing. Now, I think there's always a sort of sense here that you want to be obsessed by process as opposed to actual involvement with people. But I wonder if you can give us a flavour of how much the single assessment framework is likely to save us in terms of staff time, or is there any kind of benchmark you can give us on that one? And then secondly, on the question of the early release, has that thrown up any particular problems? There's nothing particularly identified in the report, but it rather looks as if nobody much is engaged with the service in terms of the people that have been released. What sort of numbers are we talking about there?
Hi, Councillor. Just in relation to the single assessment framework, you're absolutely right. What we were hoping to do is that we've been going through a process of decluttering some of those processes to make it much more streamlined and easier for our social work staff to, I suppose, articulate their assessments on paper, so that there is less time on administrative tasks and processes, and more time, as you say, spent with families. We do think that that will make a huge and significant difference. I know certainly we've introduced some of these templates through the child protection process, and it's had great success. And our staff, families, other partners actually have commented on the amount of processes that have been cut out unnecessarily. So we are really hopeful that this will support some of our improvement areas around getting reports in on time in future to the children's reporter. So we think by the end of the year we'll start really seeing a major significant difference in some of these improvement areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Donnelly.
Sorry, there was another point, if I may. Asked about the early release as well.
Oh, right, sorry.
Oh, sorry, yeah. In terms of the early release, I can certainly bring, I don't have exact numbers, I can certainly bring that back. I haven't had any information to suggest that there's been any difficulty with the plan at all, but we can certainly bring some more information back to committee.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, I think it would actually be quite good to get an overview of what we're actually dealing with, because obviously it's going to could have a significant impact, you know, both in terms of housing, temporary accommodation, you know, support needs. So, and I would imagine South Lanarkshire, the size it is, I mean, the next biggest to Glasgow is going to be impacted to some extent. So that would be good. Thank you. Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to commend what Craig had said on 5.31. I think it is nice to have good news stories of people coming through the system and seeing them come out the other end. That is good. The other point is the emergency early release of prisoners. Am I reassured that those prisoners have got support mechanisms in place for when they come out? Some are ending up homeless, maybe no family support to back them up. So are we putting in mechanisms to give them that support when it's early release? Thank you.
Councillor Donnelly, yes, there has been a plan that's been overseen by our Community Justice Partnership, and housing are a key partner in ensuring, as you say, on early release prisoners, that they are given the support and accommodation that's right for them, particularly in circumstances where they may not have, as you say, the right family support around them. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Chair. I think what we should have, and hopefully will have, is a report back or a seminar or whatever we have to do with all agencies involved, bringing forward the plans and the various different things. I couldn't honestly sit here and say there has been no difficulties. I don't want to raise single cases, that's not where this is for, but anecdotally I could tell you about different things that has happened. And usually a big burden does fall in the housing services because people, for whatever reasons, find themselves out, no house, so they obviously come to the housing services. It was very evident during the time of the lockdown when the release of prisoners or people in custody came out, and it was supposedly that they were with their families. You could come if you had somebody who would take you or sort of safeguard you, but within 2 or 3 weeks, and I know for a fact that wasn't the case. They then came out, they were out, and then they said, I have nowhere to go. So the impact and the homelessness at that particular time, and it has never abated since, went through the roof. So I think for everybody, and the whole council, not just us, that we really need to know what the impact will be it housing, be it yourselves, what's the next bit, what's the no next bit. I've been, as I say, I'm not going to sit here and discuss any individual or any case, but some, heartbreaking stories actually of very young people who just were floundering. So I think if you're bringing something back, then it should be every single agency or department should be involved, because, with no offence, I think it's the housing services that take the brunt eventually, because they have to find houses which are no there. We've got a housing emergency, and then what happens is you've got people who are looking for houses, they can't get one, then they see this, then they see that, and then it perpetuates, and people maybe don't even get a fair chance when they go to a house because people are actually angry that they got it in the first. So I think that it is an underlying problem, and I think it will come to the surface if we are left, with people needing houses in particular. So I think if you're, through you, Chair, if we were having something, we really should have a sort of cross-party or whatever, a multi-agency seminar or something like that, so that we all know what we're actually going to face.
Thanks, Eileen. Yeah, there certainly needs to be a multi-agency response to it. Suman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Logan. So, to cover those points, as members will recall from the briefing note we circulated, this moved quite rapidly, not just for this local authority, but all local authorities across Scotland. One of the reasons we sent the briefing note out was to make sure that elected members had visibility on what the issues were and what we were going to be doing with our partners and alongside the national approach to dealing with this. As we set out in the report, that actually in terms of where we've got to, we've managed it well, all things being said and done. I think that's to the credit of all the staff involved in the plans that took place. As Craig had highlighted and has noted, there's actually a lesson learned session going on today. So it's absolutely right for that to be undertaken in detail, for the findings of that to be shared with all the parties involved in it. And absolutely, I would be keen to share that with members in terms of understanding both what was delivered within South Lanarkshire, but also what the implications were in the short term as well ongoing. I'll be keen to take it up with the Chair whether that would be appropriate for a members' briefing session to allow fuller in-depth discussion, or whether that would be better for a report back to here. My own inclination is the briefing session actually might be more helpful for members to explore these issues in more detail, but if you're content with that, I will discuss that with the Chair and we'll then come back to you. Yeah. But I should also say I really appreciate the interest in members in this area. It's for all the reasons you've highlighted, this is important. This is not a step I imagine the Parliament or indeed government took lightly. It did have challenges for the staff involved in it, not least because of ensuring that fundamentally we were fulfilling our obligations to the individuals involved and also keeping our community safe. So your interest in this is very much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Suman. Councillor Faulkner.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a point. In a site visit last week in my ward, along with Councillor Donnelly, with housing officers, I was quite shocked to hear that the police and the housing officers don't have regular meetings now since COVID. Is that the case?
I thought they did, but I don't know. Has anybody got information on that one yet?
I'm not sure, but we can actually find out. We can come back. Obviously, that'll be a question for Housing Committee, but we can certainly find out and come back. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Donnelly.
It was just to say, Alan has got a point. There used to be a hub where social work, the police and housing would come together on a regular basis, so it'd be good if you could follow that through, because it was obviously a very good resource for sharing information.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Yeah, I mean, it was, to my knowledge, it hasn't actually stopped happening. In fact, I'm sure I'd spoken to one of the housing officers about a couple of cases and it was still ongoing, but we can get it checked out. Okay, thank you. I don't see any more comments or questions. Do we agree to the recommendations in the report?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 10, items for decision. Sustaining Social Work Children and Families Services, Budget Recovery Update, pages 91 to 100. And could I ask Gonya to speak to that? Thank you.
The purpose of the report is to provide the committee with an update on the Children and Families Budget Recovery plans, which include the commissioning of an intensive support model, introduction of a new pilot scheme to support young people transitioning to independent living, and to also provide an update to the committee on the review of the social work counselling service and the emergency social work service. And lastly, to provide an update on the review of some legacy contracts that have been in place for a number of years. Just very briefly, and the background obviously to this report is an update obviously from the previous Social Work Committee report which was presented by Liam Purdy on the 6th of March 2024. The committee will be aware of the increase in demand and cost pressures we've had on children and families budget and how this is being managed on a non-recurring basis for a number of years. The details which is outlined in section 3 of the report. The resource has used, obviously, the sustainability and value tool to identify proposals to address the gap in the children and families budget and enable children and family services to be sustained within their allocated budget, ensuring that resources, I suppose, are continued to be focused on statutory duties, given some of the very significant challenges we're facing with the budget. Moving on just to some specific budget updates, starting with the intensive support model at section 6 to give the committee an update. The aim of this strategy overall is to reduce the numbers of young people who need to be in high-cost residential care. We're looking at reducing this by 15 placements over a 2-year period. The model is based on good foundations of the promise to create better and flexible alternatives to care to enable young people to be able to return safely to their own communities and possibly even wider family, with a high level support over 7 days a week. Early analysis indicates, if successful, by reducing numbers of external residential by 15 placements, there could also be a saving of 3.6 million per year. A further 5 in year 3 could potentially see a further saving of 1.4 million. The timescales right now for awarding this contract, as you know, we're currently in a process of a tender contract. We're right at the end of that process, and we're looking at the contract being awarded to a third sector provider in early September. We're looking then at a possible 3-month run-in and looking to have the third sector model up and running by January 2025. So that's a really good progress, and we're on timescales for that. Just moving on to section 7 of the updates. Section 7 of the report provides details of an exciting new pilot project that we have in partnership with Bernardo's and the housing services in South Lanarkshire. The funding for the project has been secured via the big lottery funding, and South Lanarkshire, between social work resources and our housing and technical colleagues, we have been able to match some funding in kind. The funding, as I say, the project generally aims to provide semi-independent living support for young people who no longer wish to remain in their care placement. The first 4 young people have been identified, and the intention is that they will move into these supported flats over the next 4 weeks. As well as increasing positive options and pathways for these young people that don't wish to stay in their care placement up to the age of 21, this project has the potential to also deliver savings of about 800,000 per year. And that's the savings we would make from, again, a further reduction in these high-cost placements, because we're giving young people alternatives. Moving on to section 8 of the report, and the budget update of the report highlights the review of the social work counselling service that was agreed by Social Work Committee in March 2024 as part of the budget recovery options. Just take you through just some background to this service, which is explained in a wee bit more detail in section 8 of the report. This service was established almost 25 years ago, and it was established to meet a need of providing counselling services universally to children and young people across South Lanarkshire. It wasn't necessarily a targeted services just for young people who were in need of social work resources. It was, at the time of its inception, to be offered universally. The service has evolved and grown and has now a staffing composition of 5. The staff have a variety of skill sets and offer therapy, which include play and art therapy, and person-centred counsellors. The profile of therapeutic and counselling support over the last 25 years has significantly evolved. And that's been due to alternative funding opportunities and investments that have come from the Promise funding. It's also come from the Community Mental Health and Wellbeing funding, which I know we're going to hear a wee bit about later in the report, and also from the Whole Family Wellbeing Fund. One example which is highlighted, I wanted to draw members' attention to, is in section 8.3, is the Counselling Through Schools service, which was commissioned via South Lanarkshire Education a number of years ago. The service has, you'll see, supported over 1,400 pupils through this service over the last number of years. Of this, what we do know is 82 pupils were actually care experienced as well. So although this is a universally offer through schools, we are having targeted resources at some of our care experienced and most vulnerable young people. In addition to this provision offered universally, you'll see at section 8.4 and 8.5 outlines other community-based alternatives that have grown and are available to support young people in their mental health. Interventions offered by the social work counselling service is not a statutory function that is required to be delivered by a social work service. South Lanarkshire social work services is probably the only council and only resource in Scotland, I think, that offers an in-house service like this. And most other local authorities will have had to use, as you say, third sector and rely obviously on developments around their community mental health and wellbeing fund as well. So it's very unique to South Lanarkshire. Section 8.8 and 8.9 highlights the feedback, as you see, from stakeholders that have been involved in the review of this service, with staff and people who use the service. There's no doubt that the feedback is generally very positive, and that people are very complimentary about their experiences and the value of the therapeutic support that they have received over the years from the service. Whilst this is very positive feedback, As outlined above, supports of a similar quality are now more widely available from other partners across South Lanarkshire and the third sector. It is therefore recommended that committee approve the recommendations to cease the provision offered by social work counselling service on the basis that it is offered widely across the service, and it is not a statutory requirement for social work to deliver this type of intervention as an in-house service. It is proposed to withdraw the in-house service over a 3-month period. This would allow appropriate transitions to take place and support families who are currently involved with the service. As you see, there are currently 32 families that are actively involved with the service, and we would have to manage that process with the staff and obviously the families. If the committee were to approve this recommendation, all these cases that are allocated to the team would be reviewed as part of that transitional process, and no child would be left and family without support. If therapeutic intervention is still required, we would identify the most appropriate alternative source. Employees displaced would be matched suitably to posts in other parts of the Council's Switch 2 process arrangements. And you'll see that Table 1 at Section 8.12 outlines the current staffing, resource and costs. And Section 8.13 outlines the total cost savings per year if the service were to be stopped based on, obviously, the information that we've put in that report. I think at the moment we probably have around 2.5 vacancies out of those five posts. So it would be 2.5 members of staff. Moving on to Section 9 of the emergency social work. There has been a multi-agency steering group that has been established to look to report back to the senior management team and the social work committee in early 2025. The reason for this is a complex review, and changes to the current model may impact on current staffing structures, given any requirement for any out-of-hours changes or on-call arrangements that may be required. A benchmarking with other areas has commenced, and engagement with other out-of-hours social work services, from children through to adults, older people and mental health addictions. The outcome of this review will report to a future social work committee with options and possible recommendations at that point. Just moving on to the last section, which is in Section 10, which is the non-statutory and third sector commission services, which are highlighted in Section 10. As part of the budget recovery options, the service has been, with colleagues from contracts and commissioning and support from legal, have been undertaking a review of all legacy contractual arrangements that have been in place for almost 20 years plus. There have been 2 services identified as being out of contract with no service level agreement, and no recurrent funding solution has been found, and that's detailed in Section 10.1. In Section 10.2, you'll see that legal and procurement colleagues are assisting with the legal arrangements and are currently processing notifications to the providers, have been served over the next 3 months in relation to ending and ceasing funding. Notice, as I say, we've been engaging with those providers and stakeholders through this process. The service, and where relevant providers have engaged, appropriate exit strategies have been managed carefully with families, and the impact of these changes have been considered considerably. In terms of just the financial implications, these are detailed in Section 11. the combination of interim funding, the employee turnover, the underspends in justice and performance and support, and the actions from the budget recovery plan and options could result in a break-even position for children and families at the 31st of March 2025, as outlined by Graham's report. The employee, obviously, just to highlight, the employee implications, obviously, are the staff displaced as a result of if the decision were to cease the operations of the social work counselling service. They would be redeployed through the council switch 2 arrangements. I suppose it's just in terms of other implications, just to highlight, obviously, our current budget pressures on the allocated budget, we know, are not sustainable, and that we have been looking at all options for savings and efficiencies considered in this process, using, as you say, the sustainability and value screening tool. All options carry consequences, and we really need to be balanced against the risks to the financial sustainability and the council's ability to deliver its statutory duties, and that's why we've been looking at non-statutory options in this paper, as well as new initiatives to also look at the budget recovery. Families, just in terms of the appropriate impact assessment, equality impact assessments have been completed, and in respect to the contents of this report. Engagement and consultation has been undertaken in relation to the review of the social work counselling service as identified in section 8 of the report. This also has included service users, social workers and wider stakeholders, as well as staff within the service, and appropriate exit strategies have been identified. The proposals set out in this report have been subject to discussion with wider staff groups, managers, trade unions and all stakeholders. I would therefore like to refer the committee back to the recommendations of the report, as the committee are asked to approve the recommendations highlighted in section 2 of this report. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Anya. I've got
Thank you.
Councillor MacDonald. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Margaret. Thanks, Chair. Couple of sections I'd like to pick up on, if possible. We'll just ask the questions as one and then get responses, if that's okay. So, ideally, I'd like to ask about the counselling service first. Just in relation to the proposal, how confident are we that there is capacity out with what we are providing at present? And is there a real risk there that we may actually incur higher costs because we may have to access more specialist provision from, say, for example, Notre Dame? I'm just a wee bit concerned that this specialist service really deals with the most need within that section. So I'm just looking for a bit of reassurance, if you could maybe give me that, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
In respect to the other questions that I had was about the external provider. So initially we had our own team, I think they were called IFS at the time, Intensive Family Support Service, which was deemed not to be required a number of years ago. I'm a wee bit surprised that we're now going back to a service from an external provider at quite a significant cost. I know that you're projecting cost savings if it's successful. What happens if that doesn't work? Where do we go from there? And also, are we going to have individual service agreements in terms of what a high level of support looks like for individual young people and families? And also, how are we going to monitor and review that progress with that external provider? I have really significant concerns about sort of putting this out to an external provider. So again, I'm looking for a bit of reassurance. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. You'll let Anya answer.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. I'll just take your first question in terms of the counselling service. Yes, I can I suppose we're going to have a presentation obviously later from Ellie Coral, who's the lead for the council in terms of the Community Mental Health and Wellbeing Fund. And I suppose I know that in the report there is a wider range of universally provided services for young people with who show signs of a range of signs of distress, including mental health. We do know as well that there has been significant financial contribution to bolster services and CAMs, and that's probably for our most vulnerable young people, and probably the young people that you're referring to. We do, as you know, still have, and it's very unique to South Lanarkshire as well, or to Lanarkshire NHS, is that we do have the CAPE service, and that continues to offer services to some of our most distressed young people that demonstrate and show signs of early onset of mental illness. And we would be confident they will continue to provide that service. In terms of the counselling service we've had, as you say, you'll see 90 in the stats in the report. There was 98 young people in particular from care experience backgrounds that do and will have particular needs as they pertain to their care experience, and they have been supported through the Schools for Counselling programme. That's quite a high number, and probably some of the highest numbers we've had. We've been able to target and support through a more whole systems approach to understanding and supporting young people who might have distress behaviours, as well as obviously that higher need for young people who might need more clinical based interventions through CAMs and CAPE services. So I would be confident that that could be covered. Just going on to your second query, Councillor Donnelly, in relation to external provision. The F service, you're right, and I think the intensive family support service that is probably, as you said, probably had a number of iterations over the years. Again, it's been in place for a number of years. I think some of the vulnerabilities that we've had in relation to that service, and we're looking at, as you know, we're reconfiguring that service along with creating a 12 to 26-year-old service, which is highlighted, and I'll talk a bit more about that in the next report. The service that we're looking at commissioning what we're looking for is a high degree of flexibility out of hours. So that's a 7-day week, 24 hours a day response system, which unfortunately, under current terms and conditions of the last iteration of the intensive family support service, we didn't actually have. So I understand your concerns. I think some of it might be reassuring. Just I know from the report that Liam did present back in March, there's been some real success with other neighbouring authorities, local authorities, who have used a very similar type model, which we have basically borrowed their blueprint and based our model on some of the work that other local authorities, neighbouring authorities have had a lot of success, and they have reduced as a direct result, better outcomes for young people by bringing them back and keeping them within their own communities within South Lanarkshire, and also in reducing the budgets that has been rising across the country around high-cost residential care. I hope that answers your question, Councillor.
Thank you. Did you want to come back in, Hugh?
I could, Margaret, that would be great. I suppose really what I'm also thinking about is how we make sure that the service that we're commissioning does exactly what we're looking for. So I'm wondering how that is tied in with individual support and care plans for the young people that we're working with, particularly through that kind of through care and after care part, where I know from experience that there can be, you know, some really extreme cases and a high level of difficulty within that can also lead into the kind of criminal justice world. So again, that's why I'm asking about the individual service agreements in terms of how are we going to absolutely ensure that what we are asking this company to provide is what they're providing, and that we're not just throwing money at something in an attempt to make a difference. You know, I'm really looking to get some assurance that this will make a difference. I know there's some information out there that suggests that yes, it will, but I think the numbers that you're looking to try and achieve seem pretty high to me. So I'm just wondering how confident you are in that overall package. Thanks.
Thanks. You'll ask Suman to respond to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Building on the point that Anya said there, so that is why we've gone through quite an extensive procurement process here. That work's been set out in the previous reports that you've had in previous committees and indeed here today for the very reasons you've said. It's critical to us that we manage the risks and indeed support the improved outcome to these young people in the manner intended, which is why we are doing that in-depth work as we speak. And certainly in terms of the contractual arrangements we've put in place with the successful organisation, it will be clear about the mechanisms by which we will both monitor that and be able to kind of intervene as required. I would kind of note that, as Anya said, firstly, we are building on learning from other places. So we aren't coming to this from a complete blank page. Certainly we've built on the experience, for example, in Glasgow and other areas. We've looked at what they've done that has worked well. We've also had the opportunity and the benefit of speaking to colleagues from other areas around actually what the areas that they found particularly challenging, to make sure that we have informed our approach based on their hard lessons learned. It's also important, two things for me to highlight here. One, this is about bringing young people back into our local communities. That's something that we've identified as important when we can do it. And we don't do that lightly, but certainly our view is that that is better than external placements, certainly outside of the South Lanarkshire area. So, and this was also something that we've not been able to do before. So this isn't the IF service, this is a different offering that we will be able to provide within South Lanarkshire that young people such as these have not had in the past. And the final point is just to make that element that touched upon the element that Anya's touched upon. So our driving approach here has been around improving outcomes for these young people and delivering services close to their home. It's also a core plank, though, of our ability to get the budget under control in the recurring fashion. We have to work with the resources that we've got. As you've seen from the risk register previously, we are not in a recurringly stable position here. From our position, we see this as being good for young people, good for their extended families in our local communities, and also a key plank of how we can move to a position of greater financial stability. But we are absolutely clear about managing the appropriate risk for each of those individual young people, which is why we're doing the detailed contractual work that we are. And we will continue to keep the committee abreast of that work as it progresses. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Simon. We've got Councillor Brown.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. Obviously, this is a funding report at bottom, if you like, but then the residential care one is the biggie. And I must confess, I think we could end up with a better model than what we have to start with in terms of the arrangements there. I wanted, however, to ask about the two other things. Firstly, on the counselling thing, I just wonder if there's a risk. We've got high waiting list times for CAMS and so forth at the moment. Is there a risk we're simply adding to the waiting list that exists here without actually being able to do the sort of relatively lower level interventions that I think the counselling service currently provides? And as a sort of minor incidental technical point on that, 813 talks about the £50,000 lost from the Mental Health and Wellbeing Fund. Is that something we're able to kind of hang on to, if you like, in terms of being able to re-provision some other way? Because clearly it's got a certain objective to it, and one would have thought we shouldn't be able to having to lose that altogether, which I think is what has been suggested there. And then the second slightly different point, but sort of linked in a way, is the befriending services that are talked about with COVI and so forth. I know a little bit about the COVI service, but I have to confess not that much. But befriending has been quite a useful provision, if you like. Are we going to have any befriending services left at all if we don't give continued support to COVI in the way that's been suggested here? Because I appreciate the contracts have come to an end, but there's not much analysis in that report about what the implications for what we're trying to provide are. And I wonder again if we're losing something that we can't really afford to lose, because it gives knock-on effects and implications for other parts of the service. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Suman.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. In terms of both this point, I'll build on what you set out before. So you're quite right that actually, when we talk about counselling here, it's not to the cases that would be taken into a clinical CAMS service. So it is lower tier activity, albeit a support which is important to those families and those children in the way that Anya set out here. As the later report highlights, there's a much wider range of provision that we've got in place, and effectively what we've identified is duplication. So we have there are supports, there is sufficient capacity available to ensure that the levels of individuals that have been supported to date through this service can and will be continued to be supported. So we don't bring this committee knows we do not bring proposition like this forward lightly, which is why we're putting such high stock in developments such as our intensive family support, the work with Barnardo's and others. But given the challenges that we've got around us, it's incumbent on us to look at all of those non-statutory provisions, particularly where there is duplication. This is an area that we are as confident as we can be that there is sufficient capacity, hence why we've got the latter report, which details a whole range of provision which certainly several years ago would not have been in place and available within South Lanarkshire. And also, as Anya said, given the commitment to make sure that we work with those families and we continue to ensure that we provide assistance in the manner stated, so avoid the position that you've talked about there. Committee members don't require me to explain the importance, certainly after the pandemic, of looking after the mental well-being of children across our communities, particularly those who are most vulnerable. And certainly that's been at the forefront of our minds in terms of developing options and looking at the range of supports we've got in place. We would not be bringing this one forward if we thought there was levels of risks associated with this. In terms of your points around befriending, just to then note that from the contractual and procurement arrangements in place, those, as Anya said, are legacy arrangements. Effectively, they were, and I suppose tying into Councillor MacDonald's point before, in terms of when those are set out, they were not set out particularly, I think it's fair to say, well, in terms of what the expectation were from those providers. And as you will have seen, those are very expensive contractual arrangements in place. The key aspect of that, and I'm happy to come back to you separately, indeed any members of interest, is that again, that's duplication. There are actually other arrangements we've got in place, and indeed any individuals affected by those changes will be absolutely signposted and directed and supported by other alternative provision to ensure that they get the help that they need.
And the £50,000 point, sorry to...
So I don't have the details.
813.
So I have to say, I will let Graham come in on that before I can bumble around an answer.
Sorry, so yeah, just to clarify on that part, apologies if it's not clear. So 8.13, what we're saying there is there's £220,000 of core kind of council budget and 50,000 of the mental health and wellbeing funding that are managing those posts. So really what we're saying is in terms of any saving to the council, it would only be the 220,000. So you're correct, the 50,000 would still be there for future use, which is what we've tried to say there. That we wouldn't. By us, sorry, yes, in terms of somewhere else, so we wouldn't be given that, so we would only be making 220 in terms of the core budget and reinvesting the other part elsewhere.
Okay, thanks for that, Graham. I mean, obviously the questions that members are quite rightly raising are ones that we had raised with Suman previously in the pre-agenda in terms of the assurances that you're asking for. And in terms of intensive family support, I'd imagine there's going to be regular reports and evaluation, coming to this committee in order that we can actually measure the outcomes and outputs and the impact in terms of reducing high-cost residential places, which has long been an evidence-based policy that we wanted to pursue for the good of the young people in terms of not being out somewhere miles in some cases from their community. And we certainly raised the issue around that the assurances that people currently get in provision will be transitioned to either the community arrangements or CAMS. And that's a very good point around the impact in CAMS. I think it's important that we are kind of alerted if it is having you know, an increased impact on the waiting list because of all these the education-based services, community-based services, they have started to reduce those waiting lists, so we'll be watching that very closely. But yeah, I absolutely appreciate why members are raising this. Councillor Donnelly.
Chair. Yes, to speak to the report and welcome the fact that 8.5, that we are actually working with very detailed organisations like WASLA, which is Women's Aid in South Lanarkshire and East Renfrewshire, CRUISE, which deals with bereavement, PETAL, that deals with loss, and domestic abuse with WASLA. I think that is very important to be linking into these organisations and getting that expertise for the kids going forward. I also like to welcome the school counselling programme. I think that has proved results for a lot of children that have accessed it. And my final point that I'm going to come on to is the trauma-informed practice. I think that has to be welcomed. I think a lot of the points that we are picking up now is because we have come in with a mind of trauma-induced practice, that we're picking up the trauma that's in their young people, that they've experienced in their childhood. And we are now picking that up, where in the past, and it does say it in the paper, in the past we didn't pick that up, but now we are actually much more skilled at seeing the signs. They're seeing the signs with the counselling service and the schools, and it's all very much linking in together. I would also give a shout out for the training, for the trauma-induced training that counsellors can go on, and they can be much more informed in what that means for the young person and what it means for maybe somebody coming forward, a constituent coming forward that has been trauma-induced, and we'd be able to give a better understanding and a better support in signposting as well. Thank you for the paper.
Okay, thank you, Mary. I've got Kirsty.
Hello, thank you for this. I just wanted to clarify, Anya, you said that it's anticipated that the intensive family support service would be available 24 hours a day. I'm very familiar with GIFs in Glasgow. Now, the service that they provide there is it's an in-person service up till 10 p.m, 7 days a week. Obviously with scheduled sessions, but after 10 p.m, and obviously it's a much bigger local authority, so there's many more organisations that are involved in providing that service. It's a helpline, and which provides, to be frank, very limited support after 10 p.m, and when there's in-person support, that then does fall back onto the emergency social work service if there's a requirement there. So I just wanted to clarify, do we have any kind of idea yet what that 24-hour support will look like? And I suppose I'm interested as well with the review of South Lanarkshire's emergency social work service, possible kind of intersection between IFS and any potential review of the emergency social work service, because those organisations will be working together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, you're absolutely right. So in the service specification, when we were looking at the tender, we were very clear that we wanted it would be, in terms of the financial viability and the cost, we were looking at in-person support up until 10 o'clock. It would be on-call arrangements, but an on-call arrangement would mean that from 10 o'clock through to 8 in the morning, we would be then looking at, if an in-person response was required, it would be the service, not our emergency social work services. I think your question in relation to the review of our emergency social work service, you're absolutely right. I think we've already started to even consider some of our responses to the Care and Justice Bill and finding places of safety that are not a police cells for young people who might perhaps come into conflict with the law out of hours. and we've been looking at a way of how we can use our emergency social work services, and we've been piloting that as well. So absolutely, I think it's a really good point in terms of we are looking at wider partners in the review of our emergency social work services, which includes health, housing, police, and certainly this service as well. We would definitely look to evolve this service in our arrangements, our review arrangements going forward. Absolutely.
Thanks. Thank you for that, Anya. But you touched on something else as well, which is, and obviously we would all support young people to remain at home and in a supportive and loving family, rather than being in a residential placement. But you know, as I'm sure you'll be aware, there is a risk that when people are at when a young person is distressed, that a response may be to contact emergency services, most commonly the police. So I suppose it's just being mindful of an unintended consequence of increased contact with kind of criminal justice services when being in the community, as opposed to being in a residential placement. Thanks.
Absolutely, that is an absolute and unintended consequence, and we need to make sure, as you say, that our partners in the police, because as you say, in the evening, it's not likely to be the more specialist response police, like our child abuse or hub staff or public protection staff. It's more likely to be, as you say, our frontline police officers, and providing confidence, as you say, around the out of our system to police is a really important part of our evolution of this model. Absolutely. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Mary?
Thanks, Chair. I was coming back in and I forgot this point. It's 10.1 on COVID, the befriending service. I think it would be good for us to be mindful that if young people are transitioning from residential care into independent living, they've not got the friendship circle, and it's up to us to make that circle, develop that circle for them, or help them on the road to develop that circle. And befriending is certainly one mechanism which would be very useful, because they need to build up their trust with people. And so I think I would like to know going forward, where are we going with the befriending service? And we're not dropping it, are we?
Okay, Anya? Sumin.
So thank you, Councillor Donlan. So it's, in terms of how we continue to report in terms of in the development of the intensive family support, we will absolutely at the next report highlight how we'll do those additional wraparound supports. We would all agree in terms of making sure that the young people, when they're brought back in, are done with as most support from all the assets, if you want to use that term, within the community. Before I answer your specific question, I'd like to also just pick up on something that Councillor Williams highlighted there. It's important to recognise we will still use external placements when they're required. So it's not that we will not be sending children to external placements. It's about providing a greater range of provision and opportunities, because at the moment we have young people going into external placements because we have lacked this kind of arrangement within South Lanarkshire for those who this would be a more appropriate and indeed actually better option for them. But where individual young people are at much higher risk around that, and where an external placement is actually the appropriate place for them, we will of course place them in that environment, because our decisions will be driven by actually the best interest for that young person. In terms of the specifics to do with the befriending, as I said, we'll come back around how we will address that. Just to note though, in terms of the paper in front of you, that contract with Covey is at an end. So that's a conversation about the provider. And as I've said, there's duplication arrangement, but absolutely we're very happy to come back and talk to you in more detail around the wraparound supports we've got in place, both in terms of intensive family support and more broadly. And I'd welcome the opportunity to do that.
Okay, thanks, Suman. Councillor Logan.
Just a quick question, following on the question about Covey and the befriending groups. Is there any road, obviously, we here as a council are always mindful of budgets and various different things, and that hinders a lot of things that obviously we would love to do, but maybe are no just in the place. But as groups like Covey and or whoever, have they got a route to go to the Scottish Government to ask for cash directly and look for funding, which then would, you know, maybe highlight or bring in other things to us? So is there a route for them to do that as well?
Suman.
Depending on the type of offering that we want to make, absolutely. And again, we'll touch upon later on. I'll let Anya come in, but it's not specific to COVID. I think that's. But in terms of general, in the way that Anya set out, indeed the latter report, it highlights a range, for example, of supports we now have within South Lanarkshire that have been funded and will continue to be funded through a number of different routes, indeed with providers who have either secured themselves funding from other sources, or indeed we have worked with them in order to do that. And elected members will be very familiar with the work that's gone on about looking actually at the level of support that the council provides to the third sector, both in terms of direct funding, but also as a facilitator for them to access funding from other sources. But I'll let Anya come in on specifics.
Thank you, Simon. Just to follow on from that, there is direct funding that COVID do receive, as you say, in respect from central government around befriending and mentoring for care experienced young people. It's called the In Tandem project, and we do have young people who access that service. And I suppose I just wanted to just reiterate and make around the COVID, we still continue to have other partnership arrangements in place with COVID through different funding streams, through the Promise. This is just this particular legacy contract that we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary.
Thank you, Margaret. It's a direct question to Suman. So, Suman, can we go to Covey and ask them to reapply for a befriending programme? If that's the end of the contract, and then I just don't want youngsters left in the lurch, because I know the importance of that programme. I've evidenced it.
So, we would agree with you in terms of the importance of befriending arrangements being in place, and as Anya has highlighted, there's a range of other arrangements in place at this point. That we will not be going out for that contract again because there is no funding to go out for that contractual arrangement. And again, I would note, as Anya said, that was legacy arrangements. So I'm happy to have a separate conversation with you about some of the detail in respect of that. As I said, we can and will be delighted to have a conversation with you about the range of supports that are in place and actually how we appropriately support our young people through these arrangements. As the report sets out, though, this was a legacy contract. It's just come to an end. There's no budget to continue it. And from our perspective, we are satisfied that there are alternative provisions in place, including which COVID get direct funding from Scottish Government for.
Okay, I'll take one more point in that, Mary.
Thanks, Margaret. I'm just a bit concerned that youngsters are at budget, are having it difficult because of budget cuts, and it's their life. And we've got a duty of care, this South Lanarkshire Council, not to leave them in the lurch soon. So I'm just wanting to know how we go forward and support them.
I mean, I think Suman's kind of covered that, but I'll ask Anya to come in again.
The acoustics in here, Margaret, it's quite hard. I'm not able to pick up everything that Suman's saying. So sorry if I've reiterated some of the points you have made, Suman.
Okay, I'll ask Anya to come in again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Donnelly, just in terms of just the, as you say, for the in respect of obviously the COVI, the legacy COVI contract, we've been working with COVI for the last 3 months. We have, together, we have carried out joint visits to all the children and families with the social worker and with COVI who've been supporting them for a number of years. And we've done joint visits to make sure, and it's basically asked a question, is this a service that you're still you want to receive? Is there, and what we've been doing is signposting and providing alternatives so that to make sure that those children who continue to need some kind of befriending or support through mentoring are linked in with another service. And that has, I can assure you that process has already been undertaken jointly with COVI.
Okay, thanks, Sonia. Happy with that, Mary? I don't see any other questions. Do we agree to the recommendations in the report?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you for that, and thanks for the report. Moving on to item 11, Children and Families Locality-Based Social Work Services Modernisation Programme and Quality Assurance and Governance Team Update, pages 101 to 106. And I'll ask Sonia again to speak to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is just to update the committee on the progress made in relation to our recruitment and retention issues that we've experienced across the localities with the introduction of new senior practitioner roles and new qualified social work posts as part of the Children and Families Redesign Programme. I also wanted to just update the committee on the next stage of the redesign across children and families as part of the 3 horizon approach to redesign, and also to provide an update on the quality assurance and governance team of the Health and Social Care Partnership. Again, the background in this is this report should be read in conjunction with the Social Work Committee report entitled Locality-Based Social Work Modernisation Programme, which was presented to Social Work Committee on the 28th of June 2023. The 22-23 report gave a background, I suppose, to the significant challenges facing social work across adult, children services and justice. The report is an update to the committee in relation to the progress that has been made in relation to children's services in particular. Just as part of this, we know that it is evident that the Council has faced ongoing challenges in recruitment and retention of qualified social workers. We could say it's a very, very competitive labour market out there. Qualifications of a social worker and their skills are highly sought after. And there are extensive opportunities for those working at this level to secure employment in enabling authorities. So we know that that's been some of the significant challenges to our retention of staff in South Lanarkshire over the years. As part, obviously, in section 4, you'll see in the report, as part of the 3 horizon redesign proposal, the June report identified that the service required to modernise its approach to service delivery and create a model that could potentially mitigate some of the risks that we're having that are in relation to ongoing retention and recruitment. In particular, this was more acute in our local office, locality offices. Horizon 1, if you remember, we have now successfully recruited 20 senior practitioner roles, and they are now all in place. This has supported the retention of experienced staff in localities, which otherwise we probably would be confident that we probably would have lost experienced social workers after 3 years. So this has been a really good news story for us. We've also targeted newly qualified social workers that have been on placement, and being able to offer placements through the programme, the social work programme, has actually has given us benefits in terms of our recruitment of newly qualified social workers. The rollout, as I say, of the senior practitioner role in South Lanarkshire social work localities has been largely successful in retaining our staff and restoring resilience and confidence in meeting our public protection requirements. We are now in the process of recruiting operational managers under this new structure that was agreed last year. We are now at a position from July where last year we were faced with a 50% vacancy rate, and in some children and families localities we were looking at more than 70%. So we are now happy to report that we are 95% staffed across the localities. Moving on just to Horizon 2, the previous report highlighted that from the children and families' perspective, the redesign had already commenced through the creation of the family support hubs. We have established four family support hubs across South Lanarkshire. These family support hubs provide an open door, almost like a gateway to services for families in need of support. The service has also reviewed the Children's Young Persons Service and the Through Care and Aftercare Hub. In light of the significant expansion of duties under the Children and Young People's Act and the Care and Justice Bill and the commitment to the promise, we have the increase in demand, these areas are in need of redesign and development, and it's necessary for this modernisation to future-proof service delivery. As part of Horizon 2, it is now required to reflect the additionality of the above teams and the management structure that complements these arrangements that are now in place for the localities. The next stage now is to create operation manager roles, which will assume the same responsibilities in relation to public protection and child protection as the localities. The creation of these posts will be on the same basis as the locality redesign, in that it will be cost neutral within the current financial envelope. And you'll see it section 8, table 1 highlights the additional changes to the establishment. And as I say, emphasise that this process would be a cost neutral process. Section 6 of the report focuses on Horizon 3, which is our future developments. We recognise that the next stage for Children and Family Service is a review and redesign of how we deliver self-directed support for some of our children who are affected by disability. This will also cover transitions for young people affected by disability that need additional support right into early adulthood. This will be our next service development, and change managers have already been identified to lead on this development. We will bring the outcome of this redesign to a future committee to update the committee. Section 7 you'll see of the report is in relation to the Quality Assurance and Governance team that is based within the Health and Social Care Partnership. The Quality Assurance and Governance team was established in April 2022. It was funded initially for 3 years by Scottish Government's Coming Home agenda, primarily to review, monitor and quality assure legacy contractual arrangements that were in place for a number of years. Since its implementation, the team have made significant efficiencies, which has resulted in the funding being available to continue to self-fund this team beyond 2024 on a permanent basis. It is now required to reflect the additionality and the work of this team, that the role of the team, that we must implement a new management structure comparable to the need on development and growth of this team. This will ensure the retention of a higher skilled, experienced manager to take the developments of this team forward. And you'll see in Table 2 at Section 8 highlights the changes to this establishment for approval. And this is, again, whilst you see that there's an £8,000 per annum increase, we're confident, and Graham could probably concur with that, we're confident that this is a self-funding team that has managed to generate considerable efficiencies through through the implementation of this team. Employee implications, obviously the proposed changes on a permanent basis to the staffing establishment for Horizon 2 of the family support hubs and the young person service through care and aftercare are set out, obviously, and as you say, in Table 1 below in Section 8.2. The changes to the delivery model come out as I say, as cost neutral to establish a new operational manager post with the deletion of the team leader roles in the identified teams and the creation of more senior prac roles with the reduction of social work posts in the young person service. This will result in a reduction of 13 team leader posts from the family support hubs and the current 3 care and aftercare team and team leader operational development post. The deletion of 4 social work posts to create the 2 senior prac posts will also be cost neutral in this redesign. In terms of I'd like to probably just take the committee back to the recommendations that are set out in Section 2 of the report, which is to note the contents of the report, note the progress and changes to the operational structure across children and families as part of Horizon 2 of the service redesign, and approve the changes to the establishment in the post identified in Section 8, Tables 1 and 2 of the report for children and families and the Quality Assurance and Governance team. Thank you.
Thank you for that report, Anya. I don't see any questions or comments. Are people... Sorry, Kirsty?
Sorry, Anya, just a quick question to clarify in terms of the vacancy levels for qualified social work posts. You mentioned at 3.3 it talks about how in May 2023 there was a 25% vacancy rate in qualified social workers. Is that across children and families or across South Lanarkshire? Sorry, just going back to 3.3 and your comments about QSW's vacancy rate. So 3.3, it says there was a 25% vacancy rate in QSWs. Is that just in children and families or is that across South Lanarkshire?
So in last year, that would have been a 25% vacancy rate in qualified social workers, primarily across both the adult and children's services. Now, we did experience in certain localities, i.e. our more rural locations, we were experiencing it this time last year, a 70% vacancy rate in our Larnac Children and Families Service. But we've now managed through the recruitment of the senior pracs, as explained in the introduction of those senior pracs, and the targeting of qualified social workers, we've now seen, obviously, not a return to normal levels, but we've seen a significant increase in staffing and less vacancies in our Larnac offices.
So I don't know, maybe Eileen might have the answer to this in terms of specifically what is the current vacancy rate for qualified social work posts, including senior pracs and obviously social worker. Great, thanks.
So yeah, I can provide that after the meeting. I don't have that details to hand because I don't have access to the systems, but I can provide that to you certainly after in terms of current vacancy levels compared to what's been.
It would just be good to see the actual impact in terms of statistics.
You can see the difference. I'm sure you know, like that in terms of, because a similar model has been approached in within adults and older people, and we are seeing, you know, significant increases in terms of retention levels, you know, and we're also bringing in newly qualified social workers as well. So I can certainly provide that too.
Thank you, Eileen.
Just to add to that, I know we'll get you the details, but certainly we're actually just at the point where recruitment's on our mind all the time, and retention, and has been as a significant strategy and focus for the last year. And we are currently just in, as I say, in the process of recruiting the operation managers. and at the point where we also we just finished newly qualified social work vacancy. We had a recruitment drive there, and the interviews had taken place. And we were at a point about 6 weeks ago where all the posts were actually offered. So we were delighted with that result, but we can certainly get you the actual figures of that as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, it would be really good to be able to sort of see the positive outcome of this, because we all know in this committee a crucial issue there is in terms of recruitment. So if we've made a positive impact on that, it would be really fantastic to actually, see that the evidence base that it's made a difference. That would be great. But that does the difference, and the impact sounds positive at the moment. I don't see any questions. Do we agree the recommendations in the report?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Thank you for the report. Moving on to items for noting. Item 12, Children and Young People's Community Mental Health and Wellbeing Support, pages 107 to 112, and it's Anya again to speak to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, we've got Ailey Coral, who's going to present. She's online, and she's our Community Mental Health and Wellbeing Lead for the Council, and she's going to present the report.
Okay, thank you. Ailey, over to you. Thank you.
Good morning, committee members. My name is Ailey Coral. I'm a senior educational psychologist, and I support a number of the projects relating to community mental health. This agenda item concerns children and young people's community mental health and wellbeing support. And the purpose of the report is to provide an update on community mental health funding provided by the Scottish Government South Lanarkshire Children's Services, and highlight some areas of success within this work stream. I'd like to draw members' attention to Section 3 background. In particular, I'd like to draw your attention to paragraph 3.1, which reminds us that the Children and Young People's Community Mental Health and Wellbeing funding was a response of the Mental Health Task Force, highlighting the need to prioritise early intervention and prevention support. The resulting funding from the Government South Lanarkshire's Children's Services partnership is a rolling grant amounting to £849,000 per annum. Paragraph 3.2 notes the importance of engagement with young people as a principle of this approach, and details some of the engagement undertaken, including the ongoing work of the Wellbeing Warriors. It notes the recent appointment of a VASLAN Development Officer to support with engagement with families and the third sector. Section 4 details some of the core supports and services delivered, with detail about each of these services being provided in Section 5. Paragraph 5.1 starts with one of these services, Scottish Action for Mental Health, more commonly known as SAMH, Let's Connect service. And this service has two main strands: mental health awareness raising workshops aimed at children and young people, parents and carers and staff, and a peer supporter programme in secondary schools. Starting with the mental health awareness raising workshops, these have been extremely well received by children and young people, families and schools, and wider organisations within South Lanarkshire. To date, there have been a range of topics, including mental health awareness, understanding and managing stress and anxiety, managing my wellbeing, and a specific workshop targeted at parents and carers for listening to and supporting my child. This year, the workshop topics hope to expand. The feedback from these workshops has been extremely positive, with 98% of parents and carers and 98% of staff scoring the workshops as very helpful or helpful. And similarly, young people's feedback has been exceptionally positive. The second strand of this programme is the peer supporter programme. And as with a number of the other community mental health and wellbeing supports, this was implemented as a result of the engagement and views with young people. Young people have highlighted the role they play in supporting their peers and felt it would be beneficial to have some additional support in this area. SAMH are rolling this out to secondary schools and supporting the implementation of setting up this peer support within the schools. Following the peer supporter training, almost all young people who took part said they now know where to go to find help. Paragraph 5.2 gives an overview of COOTH, which is an online mental health and wellbeing service for children and young people aged 10 to 18 and for care experienced people up to the age of 26. Again, this was commissioned after young people identified digital supports as being a support which would be useful due to the access of this being able to be provided out of hours and the anonymity that this can provide. COOTH provides a range of supports, including a magazine, an area where young people can journal thoughts and complete personal goal setting, a live chat where qualified counsellors can chat to them and provide support, a messaging service, and a moderated peer-to-peer support. COOTH has supported over 1,000 young people in South Lanarkshire since it started providing services, and within the period April 23 to April 24 has supported 848 young people. Most young people are accessing this support out with office hours, and over 90% of users would recommend. North Lanarkshire have also recently commissioned this as a service, making it easier to promote COOTH across all of Lanarkshire. Paragraph 5.3 highlights details about the Action for Children Blues programme. This is a preventative programme which targets young people at greatest risk of developing future difficulties and is able to provide support to pupils who may have shown indicators of need through scoring above a threshold on a standardised scale, but who may not yet be on the radar of staff. This evidence-based programme is based on cognitive behavioural therapy approaches and is run with groups of young people, supporting them by teaching skills, techniques, and providing them with a toolkit of resources they can use in the future. 85% of young people who have taken part rate this at least 4 out of 5 stars, and pre and post evaluations are also very positive. Paragraph 5.4 notes the ongoing engagement of the Wellbeing Warriors, who are a group of young people that work with the council to share views about mental health and wellbeing supports and services. The young people have also played a key role in organising a Wellbeing Warriors conference, which invited young people and key partners from across South Lanarkshire to chat about mental health and wellbeing supports. This has now been organised by and supported by young people for the last 2 years, and feedback from both conferences have been exceptionally positive, with young people highlighting the benefit of hearing from external speakers on a variety of topics that they've chosen and learning about the work going on within other schools. Paragraph 5.5 notes the role of the senior educational psychologists contributing to the implementation of the projects and supporting wider capacity building work for staff, including training on suicide prevention. Paragraph 5.6 talks about the role of the VASLAN Development Officer, whilst paragraph 5.7 describes a new mental health and wellbeing website for children and young people, which has been co-created with them, and this was launched in spring 2024. So turning back to the recommendations in section 2, paragraph 2.1, the committee is asked to agree the following: that the additional approaches available in schools and communities that are benefiting from supports and services in relation to community mental health and wellbeing be noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Ailey. That's a really informative report, and it's really useful in the context of what we were discussing previously in relation to social work psychological services, to see some greater detail in terms of what's actually out there, and in particular within the third sector. So that's been really useful and interesting. I'm just looking at the governance and reporting. It goes through the community planning partnership, so that it would also be kind of useful probably to get, we will get an update now, assuming in terms of what will happen to people who had previously been receiving a service from social work. So I presume we would get an update on that at this committee as well. And the VASLAN Development Officer, they are very useful in terms of linking the community in with those groups as well. It is part of their remit to make sure that the community is aware of those groups and can gain access and identify funding sources and all the rest of it. So that's been very useful this morning. I've got Anya wanting to come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to point out, obviously, the apologies, Appendix 1 is missing. Report and it's a technical glitch. Get that resolved.
All right, sorry. So you don't want to come in then?
No.
No, right, okay. Councillor Frame.
Aye, thanks very much, Chair. I just want to come in and thanks and commend the report. After it's a resource, it's very challenging. It's nice to have a nice positive paper here, and it's showing that the value that we have in South Lanarkshire Council for our young people and the support that we have out there. So I just want to thank them for that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Elise. Ailey, did you want to come back in?
It was just to say about the reporting, and we report to the Scottish Government now annually, so those reports will be available. And Vaslin have also established a network of supports. Just to follow up on just one comment that was mentioned earlier about training, some of the suicide prevention training is also open to all councillors as well, and councillors have attended in the past. So if you want any information, you can follow up with me. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that. That's good to know. Do we agree the recommendations in the report?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, item 13 is Carer Strategy 2023 to 2026, pages 113 to 146. And can I ask Ian to speak to the report? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So this report's really to highlight to the committee the current version of the Carer Strategy. As the committee will be well aware, carers play a very vital role in our communities, supporting family members and others with their care needs. And there's responsibilities given to the Council under the Carers Act to make sure that we support carers effectively in those kind of caring responsibilities. The strategy itself is pulled together through the Carer Strategy Board, and that comprises a large number of partners who provide support to carers, the Carer Centre and others that are involved in that group. The strategy came about through an extensive kind of consultation process, a number of events, consideration to the previous strategy and what had been achieved and what still had to be done. And that's been brought together into the refreshed version that's in your pack. I'll particularly draw your attention to the section 4.5, which highlights the priorities for the strategy. So hopefully you find the document helpful in terms of understanding the work that's ongoing currently in terms of supporting carers, and happy to pick up any questions and ask the committee to note the recommendations in section 2.
Thank you, Ian. I don't see any questions, comments. Alan?
Thanks, Chair. It's just a point of information. In page 120, introduction, the fourth bullet point, social and financial inclusion. Bearing in mind that the Westminster Government and the Scottish Government have withdrawn universal winter fuel payments, have the Department or the carers any ideas into ensuring that carers and the service users maximise their income by applying for pension credits?
So that's obviously a fairly recent development, which the strategy board will need to have a look at. But clearly, one of the areas of work we do to make sure that carers are supported in terms of maximising their income through money advice and so forth. So that will certainly be, I think, be on the agenda for the group going forward.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions. Do we agree the recommendations in the report?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. And could I thank Ian for that report? And moving on to item 14, Blantyre Life Campus, pages 147 to 156. And could I ask Ian to speak to that again? Thank you.
So this report was one that I think the committee was keen to see. A kind of summary of where we got to with Blantyre Life after this kind of first year of operation. So just to remind the committee members that the campus itself has got a range of different activities on it. So HSCP has supports 20 tenants in council properties who have care needs and properties which are adapted to their needs and are supported with technology. We have 20 beds in our intermediate care hub, and that supports folks coming out of hospital who need a time to rehabilitate and recuperate and get them back home, hopefully. We've also got some physiotherapy and clinical spaces, and we have our technology demonstrator area and training spaces. So the report gives an overview of all those activities. So the houses themselves have been well utilised. I think they're very popular with the tenants. I think a strong model for us to kind of consider going forward, and very much fits within the Council's current programme around progressive housing. So this is very much a benchmark, a template to think about that progressive housing model going forward. So hopefully the report gives you some assurance that model has worked effectively. The intermediate care unit itself, was tested previously in Canderhaven Care Home with some success in terms of getting people back home. We've obviously now moved into our new kind of more state-of-the-art facility, purpose-built for intermediate care. So as you see from the report, there was over 140 people went through that resource in its first year of operation, and bearing in mind that we started off gradually and kind of built up the occupancy as the staff team became familiar with the environment and the pathways got better established. So we're currently operating with around about 90-95% occupancy on a typical week. You'll see from the information provided that the model has delivered what we hoped it would, that a majority of people are going home with either no or reduced care. So bearing in mind these folks are coming out of hospital with a substantial request for care needs. So in terms of meeting their long-term outcomes of being able to live independently, to be targeting resources where they're most needed, the model seems to be working particularly well, and we'll hope that it will continue to do so. If anyone's been down at the site, they'll see it's generally quite busy these days. The meetings rooms, the training rooms are well occupied. We've got a range of activities supporting local community, doing training with staff. The report references, for example, the number of staff who are training up in the use of technology in terms of delivering care. So that's been very successful in terms of promoting the use of technology in care delivery. And hopefully we'll see benefits from that in years to come as the new digital equipment becomes more available. And we're seeing some useful work being done by the physiotherapy team in the gym, which again is being well utilised, and we've got some collaborations going with some of our universities in terms of research and development. For example, recently we had a robot visit us from the Heriot Watt Robotarium with a PhD student who's doing some research around stroke rehab. So we're able to use the facility to progress that research. So we hope to develop many more of those collaborations going forward. So I hope the report is helpful in giving you an overview of what we're doing within the significant investment the Council put into Blantyre Life, and give you some assurance that it's delivering what we said it would do. Happy to pick up any questions.
Thank you, Ian. I've got Councillor Chalmers.
This report, it's really welcome. And as you see, this is now becoming quite a busy hub and well embedded within the wider Blantyre community too. So I'm really pleased to see the flow is better than what was anticipated, because that was always something that I think there's some folk doubted that at the beginning, but it's really good to see that. I suppose my question is,
Can't hear you, Maureen.
Yeah, I think we might have a technical issue. Machine's just kicked out as well.
I think Councillor Chalmers has got thrown out. What we'll do is I'll move on to Alan and then come back if she manages to get back on. Alan. Oh, sorry. Councillor Chalmers. Okay, on you go.
The system there. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Thank you. So hopefully you got the first wee bit of what I said was going to welcome the report and certainly recognising that this is a busy hub now, doing really well and very much part of the Blantyre community. My question really was round about, I appreciate this is about assessment, about community care assessments, but I wondered, Ian, if you could give us a wee sense of what the differences might be in whether someone is allocated to the Home First Re-enablement Service or the Blantyre Life facility. You know, what kind of differences might there be there that would determine one service is better than the other for someone? And just I was thinking and speaking about this earlier, but I suppose some of us spent 30 years since the NHS and Community Care Act saying to people, don't go home from hospital without a community care assessment. And we're obviously very much moving on from that for the reasons that have been set out. But how do we communicate that to people? And how do we make sure that folk are reassured that these new types of services will help them and give them good outcomes? Thank you.
Okay, so we have, I suppose now, a suite of services under the kind of the Home First banner, Blantyre Life being one of them, care at home reablement teams being another, and we've also got some NHS EHP staff who are working under this principle as well. So the intention really is to have a range of services that support people to go home and live as independently as they can do, to maximise those rehab and reablement inputs to them, so they're less reliant on services. People want to be able to look after themselves, so the intention of services is to do that. We also see that will release additional kind of capacity back into the system to deal with the demands of care coming through. So there are similarities across the range of services, but I suppose the difference in Blantyre Life, we're probably picking up a more dependent group of service users in the first instance. These are folks who are probably on the cusp of looking at residential care, for example, or who may need a very substantial package of care if we can't help them recover from the situation they find themselves in. So we see that kind of intensive rehab approach does support people to become more confident and participate in some of the activities that the physiotherapists might, for example, prescribe to them in terms of how they might overcome some of the challenges they currently face. So that kind of intensity of support from the Blantyre team is very helpful. We're also finding it's quite useful in terms of introducing families to technology, using some of the products allow you to kind of drop in your family, for example, so you can check in with your family member throughout the day without having to be in the house. You can use technology to go and actually see them, have a quick chat with them, reassure yourself they're okay, and pick up any issues. So it's been very effective in introducing families to those kind of approaches where they maybe hadn't fully understood the potential.
Thanks, Ian. Alan?
Chair, thanks very much for that very comprehensive report. A capital outlay of £8.7 million, and you mentioned gymnasium, meeting rooms and cafes. Within the Blantyre area, within 250 yards of that centre, there are meeting rooms, gymnasiums and cafes. But down to my main point, you say the service users. How much is it costing us for it? Bearing in mind our budget challenges, how much is it costing us per person to use the Blantyre hub for people who, as the report rightly says, have been clinically assessed as fit for discharge? Thank you.
Okay, so the folks who are clinically fit for medical discharge and they're coming out of hospital with a request for often significant levels of care. So if you consider that if you buy an hour of care, that will cost £22 per hour, plus all the costs of supporting that infrastructure. So if someone comes out of hospital, say with a 15-hour-a-week care package, and that's ongoing for a year, that's a considerable sum of money. I haven't got the exact price, unit cost of the facility, but I can get that to you. It will be expensive. It's not a cheap service to deliver bed-based intermediate care in the short term, but that 28 days of input could be saving the council many months and years of care at home input on an ongoing basis. So essentially it's very good for the individual in terms of helping them recover and be independent. It's also good for the council's bank balance and helps us target scarce resource to those in greatest need. So that's the kind of lens I think you need to look at it, not the short-term view of how much does a week of care cost there, what's the impact on the individual and how does it play out in terms of the cost of the entire system.
If I recall, the staffing in the Blantyre hub is £8.4 million for capital outlay, £1.7 million for 43 staff, £1.7 million for 20 people, and as you say, rehabilitation and that. And I did raise this with you before, why the bedrooms were put upstairs. When we look at that, people who are needing rehabilitation, God forbid there's a fire there and they have to try to get out. But I'm quite shocked in the view of the budget challenges we've got, shutting homes, shutting 7-day centres, that we're spending at least £1.7 million and 43 staff. But I'm sure you'll come back with the correct figure for me. Thank you.
Yeah. So the staffing levels are staffing levels we agreed with the Care Inspectorate to be compliant with the regulations. Delivering care for 20 people 24/7 is an expensive business. So that's what it costs to look after people. It costs that to look after people in the community. So what we're trying to deliver is a cost-effective model that delivers good outcomes for individuals. So as I said earlier, in the short term, it's a relatively expensive, high intensity input, but it produces good outcomes for the individual and avoids costs that are ultimately not necessary and not what the person wants in the long term.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Yeah, I think that's the point in terms of the longer term benefit financially. You'll take, you know, in terms of return on an investment, if you like, you're going to take a number of years to see the fruition of that. But also, I agree that it should be part of the progressive housing strategy in terms of looking at a whole option and different range of accommodation and developments for vulnerable and older people. It is an option, and it's an option that we are in the process of evaluating and in monitoring over a period of time. I mean, I've now been up there 2 or 3 times, and I have to say the people that I've spoken to are absolutely delighted with it and do feel a lot more confident, you know, when they're ready to go home, you know, if they've been discharged from the stroke ward or whatever. So having spoken to a number of people, I would say it definitely kind of bears out what the guys are saying. Subin, you wanted to come in, sorry.
Thank you. Just to kind of pick up another point that Councillor Faulkner mentioned there, this is a reminder to all members, including Councillor Faulkner. In terms of suggestions around fire risk, all the council's buildings are assessed in detail in terms of fire safety. The Blantyre hub and Blantyre facility has been designed with high levels of risk management in respect of that. It is not the only premises that where we care for people, which requires them to take a lift. And I would remind all members to be thoughtful about their language in terms of that, so that there's no scope where we create undue anxiety around individuals within our community when it comes to such important matters. These are areas that we take safely and we take seriously in terms of safety for the individuals. And it's important that we understand that the buildings that we operate are operated at the highest levels possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I've got Councillor Donnelly. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Ian, how many are in the hub that are self-financing? Oh, sorry.
Yes, so in terms of the financing, no one in the immediate care unit pays for the care. So essentially they're in free personal care. They're not living there permanently. It's a short-term residency that they've got there. So essentially the council bears the cost of the care, because that's legally that's what we need to do in terms of free personal care, but it's also the right thing to do in terms of supporting the person in that kind of recovery journey to allow them to go back home. So we're saying that economically it's sensible for the individual and it's sensible for the council to have that kind of intensive, you know, rehab type of approach.
Okay. Comments? Do we agree the recommendations in the report?
Agreed.
Okay, and thank you for that update. Moving on to item 15, Care Inspector updates for registered social work services from 1st January to 30th of June 2024, pages 157 to 164, and again asking to speak to the report. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So this is just one of our regular update reports to the committee in terms of services that have been inspected, and I think particularly folks are interested in council services. So the most recent inspection took place down in Clydesdale fairly recently in terms of the care at home service. So I'm very pleased to say that's a highly successful outcome. The service scored 5s across the board, and I think the inspector didn't give consideration to improving that even further. So I think we have real confidence that the care home service in Clydesdale is performing very well and is managed very well. So commendations to the team for achieving that result. The report also kind of notes some of the changes around daycare from previous IGB and social work committees. We've talked about the daycare review and the consolidation of services into fewer buildings. So in terms of the practical formalities around that, we've left a number of buildings and brought the services into less centres. So formally we've had to deregister those buildings. So section 5.1 notes that kind of change in circumstance. So hopefully the report's kind of helpful in terms of giving you that overview, and I can pick up any questions you have on the detail of that. Thanks.
Thank you. Catherine?
I would just like to record our thanks to the team at Clydesdale and to the home carers, and especially. I had no doubt that they would get a very good report, and they have improved since the last time, so that's really good news. So just like that recorded. Thanks.
Yep, thanks for that, Kathleen. Just echo those comments. Mary?
Thank you, Margaret. It was on the Hamilton Home Care Service. That report, that inspection was 2021 and we got a 3. Has there been a change in that situation since then, Ian?
So that was the last time that the care inspector looked at the service. So those grades stay as they are until the next inspection. So the care inspector, I think, are a bit behind in terms of their inspection schedule. They were set back quite considerably by the pandemic period and some of the additional activities that came out of that. So we're only now starting to see inspections kind of pick up. So I'm sure they'll get around to Hamilton at some stage, but it could be a wee while before we get all of our services re-inspected, so we get those results updated.
A 3, have we been working on improving that grade since then?
Yes, absolutely. As you can see, generally we're looking for our services to score higher levels than that. So the kind of approaches that our colleagues in Clydesdale have in play is the type of standards we want to see mirrored across all of our care home services. So we have put in place obviously a bit of more oversight of the service to try and achieve that consistency across all of the services. I'd be optimistic that next time the Hamilton service is inspected, they would get a more positive outcome.
Thank you. Eileen?
Thank you, Chair. As everybody knows, I'm in great favour of council workforces, and I never can praise them enough. And Clydesdale in particular is quite challenging because of the distances and the various places that, we have wee hamlets here and wee houses there, and just different things. I think it's quite challenging in some respects, and that's a good result, and I had absolutely no doubt. And I think as a councillor, or any councillor sitting here, the proof of the pudding's always in, do you get many complaints? And if you don't get a lot of complaints, and people don't need to come back to tell you how wonderful it is, they'll come and tell you if it's problematic or problems. But if they don't come back to tell you, then you can assume that everything's absolutely going, to their satisfaction. Just one of the other things, and I think I've asked this before, and if the inspectors go to the external companies as well, and if they do, who then receives these reports? Do we get them back? I'm not absolutely sure where they get reported back. And but again, like Catherine, and for all workers everywhere, I think we should say a big thanks. But I'm just wondering where that would end up.
Okay, so all services are registered with the care inspectorate have got to comply with the kind of national standards. So they're all inspected in the same way, to the same regime. So all of our contracted providers are also inspected on a regular basis. So we do see some of those providers being subject to inspection, you know, as we go forward. So we're very much involved in that. We're notified when the inspections are taking place. We're often there when the feedback's given. Particularly if there's any difficult feedback to be received, we're generally invited into the conversation, and we'll try and support the provider with any actions that they need to take forward. So we're very much cited on that, and that's kind of part of our contract monitoring approaches to make sure that we've got a good eye to what's happening with our contracted providers.
Thank you. Yep, Simon.
Thanks, Ian. So just to kind of add to that point, we've had some discussion already with the Chair and Vice Chair, so we're going to bring that additional information as part of this report going forward. So we will, it won't be all the gradings of all the providers. What we propose in the first instance is that any gradings that are undertaken within the quarter from external providers, we will add into the report, so the committee's got visibility on that as well.
Good, Chair. And it also then helps you to reassure, should I say, people who might come to you to say, you know, why am I getting this or that or the other? So if you have information to hand, you can say, well, there you are, it's, you know, it's good reports, etc., and allay their fears as well.
Yep, thanks for that, Eileen. I don't have any more questions. Do we agree with recommendations in the report?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any items of urgent business, so with that, could I thank everyone for their contributions and attendance, and the officers for the reports, and Stuart for his admin, and is that Angela for their support. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Chair.